Hello and welcome to Lit Illuminated. This is a space for us to talk about books, not only how they bring understanding to ourselves, but also how they connect us to the world around us. Typically in this space, I will take you through a book and I will talk to you about the patterns that I see there, the way I see it connecting us to a larger community, and potentially looking at it as a writer in the way of investigating how the person is telling their story. Today, I'm going to talk to you about something a little bit different. I'm actually going to talk to you about 3 books because I feel it's important to talk about these synchronicities that just happened in my life that I experienced, but also how those books connected me to larger stories beyond myself, but also helped me really recognize something very personal. So I was recently on a trip to Hawaii, and as we were getting ready to go, I was debating about how many books to take, as one does when they go on a trip. And my husband said to me, I'm sure there's bookstores in Hilo. And I was like, of course there are. So I Googled them, I looked at all the different bookstores, and the one that stood out to me was Basically Books. And it just was something that really resonated with me. And typically, when I go to places and I look up bookstores, I want to go to all of them. But really, I just honed in on Basically Books and felt like that was the space I needed to go to. So on our first day there, we're traveling back from Volcanoes National Park. And I said to my husband, let's go and find Basically Books. And we couldn't find it. We drove past it. It wasn't where we thought it was. And I was ready to give up. I was already looking up another bookstore. And he's just like, hold on. Let's just go back and see if it's there. And sure enough, it was exactly where it was supposed to be. We just didn't see it. And I was so excited. So we walked in there, and it's a small bookstore. But the reason that I wanted to go to this bookstore is that it had a lot on Hawaii history. And so as soon as I walked in, I realized it was the right space for me. A lot of books from local and indigenous authors and in that space in the fiction area, and I was thrilled to see that. So I picked up my first book, and that was The Healers by Kimo Armitage. And I was drawn to the image as well, but I looked at the back and read the description. I was like, that sounds perfect. It sounds exactly what I need. I'm done shopping. And my husband's like, I really think you need to go to the next aisle over. I think you're going to find something there. And I was like, okay, well, all right. I mean, the bookstore is fairly small. And I turn around the corner where he had pointed me to, and I see right in front of me Hawaii mythology. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love mythology. I feel like it provides so much information about place, people, relationship. It often gets discounted, but it's so important to understand our narratives and to understand the ways of how we understand the world. And so I saw this one, which was Pele and Hi'iak, and the story of Hawaii. And I was like, oh, perfect. It's shrink wrapped, so I couldn't actually see anything of it. So I quick looked it up online. I was like, okay, this seems like a good one. You never know, right? Like, is this a good version or not? So I'm still hoping it is. I haven't opened it yet. So I'm like, okay, perfect. And I now have 2 books. I have, The Healers and Pele and Hi'iak. Like, let's go. And I turn around and I see theory and history. And I was like, I cannot walk away from here without looking at indigenous theory. And so I start looking at the books, and I see this one, the title that says The Past Before Us. I immediately pick it up because of the spiral of time, which I've talked about many times on this podcast as well in other spaces that I'm in, because I'm obsessed with the spiral of time. So just a reminder on that, most of the time, people see the world as linear time, which is, the past behind you, the future ahead of you. It's in a line. We're going from one point to another. But if you take time as a spiral and it's moving, that means the past, present, and future can be happening simultaneously, especially if you collapse down that spiral. And since we're talking about Hawaii, the theory of time for the Kanaka Maoli is that the future is behind you and the past is ahead of you. And so that's why the past before us was, oh, that sounds like a me thing to look at because it's about time. And then I was like, but this seems really familiar. And so I looked it up on my app that I have all my books listed in. And sure enough, it was already there. So I'm like, okay, so this is my copy that was sitting at home. And so I'm like, I'm not picking up that one. And I just started like, browsing the rest of the titles. And I think this is what's so fascinating to me is that how we select books and how they call to us when you're just looking at the spine of books and a sea of books. What calls to you? Why do you pick that one up? I don't always know. I feel like we're guided so many times, and that's exactly what this felt like. So I'm browsing the titles after I put The Past Before Us away, and I see this one, and I pick it up, and this is the Remembering Our Intimacies by Jamaica Osorio. And I see this cover, and I'm like, that looks really familiar. I feel like I have read this, or I've seen this. And I look the book up in my app, and it's not there. And I'm like, that's weird. And even as I was like, okay, well, I'm getting it. I need this book. I read again the back, what it was about basically, and was like, yeah, if I need this book. I just felt like I had to walk out with it. And the whole time, even as I'm walking up to the register, I'm like, I feel like I already have this. And so I leave with Remembering Our Intimacies, Pele and Hi'iak, and The Healers. And so what's interesting to me about this is if you think about the spiral of time, which I just talked about, that it was like myself knew that I had already read this because I will read it, and I did read it, kind of past, present, future, all in one, because it was going to be really impactful, and it was going to be something really important for me. So anyway, we leave the bookstore, thank you Basically Books in Hilo, and go back to where we're staying. I immediately put away the book that I was reading on the trip and started reading this. In the introduction, we're early in the introduction, and try to find where it is, that she's sharing the story about her dad and his brother and how they went with their grandmother to the 1959 Kilauea eruption. And I was like, oh my gosh, we were just there looking at this crater. She talks about Devastation Trail. I was like, we were just walking on that. And so in those places where, if you think about time, I'm like, I was in the place that her father was when he was 8, and we experience place, if you think about time as a spiral, simultaneously at different times, 1959, 2025, and I'm reading about it at the same time of being in it. It was like how you work through time in that whole kind of space. And so it just brought that extra connection to place and to the book, because what I was reading is what I was seeing and experiencing. Anyway, so what's important here is all that's important, but what's important here is that her father at this time, they go and see the volcano, and he says to his grandmother, like, is this Pele? And his grandmother just turns around, walks back, gets in the car. And his brother is like, oh my gosh, why did you go and mention Pele? And it was this idea of the god Pele was also different to the god they were learning in Sunday school. And so from a child's perspective, this confusion or this complication of like, how do we maintain and hold our aqua, our gods here in place, and the God of the Bible, do we, don't we? And it's really this complexity of settler colonialism and the impact it had on indigenous cultures and continues to have on indigenous cultures and understanding of the world and the way we interact. And so that's how she kind of starts this whole thing. And I think it's on page 5. It's kind of important of how she talks about this way of trying to re-remember and using story as a way to re-remember. And so on page 5, she says, this book is what possibilities lay before us as we remember all that has been strategically dismembered. And so the fact that this is how she's bringing us into this space and to talk about what was strategically dismembered in this way of re-remembering and honoring and understanding story and how it connects. Kanaka Maoli. So Osorio decides to use a story as a way to help the reader navigate the investigation of story, of place, sexuality, of gender, of leadership. And the story Osorio uses is the story of Pele and Hi'iak. And I was like, well, I also bought a book about Pele and Hi'iak. And I like, what are the chances that the mythology used in this indigenous theory book is just happens to be the other mythology book that I picked up? Now, in this, Osorio says most people understand this mythology. It is essentially the story of Hawaii. So the interesting thing for me, and one of the spots of revelation, was sitting in Hawaii, and I'm reading a book on indigenous theory. And I had this moment where I was like, seems counter to what people would expect me to be doing, or maybe what I should be doing in this space. And I really had to reflect on that and say, no, like this is exactly who I am. This is what I should be doing. I am the person that goes to Hawaii and reads theory, and not just theory, but Kanaka Maoli theory, and specifically about place and story and how it's connected and how it's so important and vital to be thinking about, and also that constant push against settler colonialism. And so for me, I had to honor that uniqueness of myself and also put aside those expectations that I was placing on myself that was from whatever the world might be thinking, which I shouldn't even be paying attention to anyway. But for me, it was like, okay, confirmation. It is who I am. This is exactly what I should be doing, and I am doing. And I'm going to ignore those voices from the outside that are thinking I should be doing something different. So that was at one point in this space that I gained an understanding about self, and also, where my interests and passions are. And so I was really excited about that. And then on my way home, or the last day, I started reading The Healers. Loving the book. It is talking about a family that are healers, and the training and the process in there. We're talking about two cousins in this space and their journey on becoming healers, and all the knowledge that they have to gain and the learning that they have to do in that space. And we have shark god and a centipede god, I think, and really just connecting to not only place within the herbs and the flowers and the spaces within the earth that they used for healing, and the water, but also the space of calling out to their aqua. I almost said atua, but that's the Maori. The aqua. And so really using that space as a connection to ancestors as well. And so, to not give too much away, we get to a point in the book where one of the characters has died, and they're a group of healers. So they have decided that they are going to bring this person back to life. And they have put this task on one of the young healers that has just been going through like the apprenticeship and learning. And they're like, this is what you need to do. And as they're gathering all the stuff they need to work through this process of resurrecting this person, bringing them back to the world, bringing them back to life. One of I think it might have been the grandmother, says to them, this is what Hi'iak had to do with Lo'iopo. And I was like, oh my gosh, what are the chances that I would have 3 books that use the same story? How is that even possible? How would I have even known that? So the whole thing just was like mind blowing that I picked 3 books out of a packed bookstore that were all connected to the same story. And so Osorio talks about this story, and in this, so we have Pele who wants to go get her lover collected, who is Lo'iopo, and she sends her sister Hi'iaka to go get him. And I think it's that he thinks Pele's not coming, and so he kills himself, or somehow he dies. And when Hi'iaka gets there, he's dead, and so like she has to bring him to life. And it was like just a sentence in here, and then it was just a sentence in here, but it was like the two connection was crazy. Pele gets mad because Hi'iaka is taking so long, and she thinks that she's not bringing her lover, and so she ends up killing Hi'iaka's lover. There's a lot going on there. I know that's not what we're talking about the story here, but what I really wanted to talk about was the way that the synchronicities of this thread being woven through all 3 books that I picked up, and then also my process of understanding the importance of reading this and feeling like I had already had it, and linking it into that spiral of time. It just made me think about these ways that books come to us, and that we don't always fully understand it. Sometimes someone hands it to you. Sometimes you are in a bookstore and you just pick 3 books that then have such an impact on you. But also, when there is that pattern, when there is that space where it keeps repeating, there's a reason for that. Like, this is something to pay attention to think about. What do I need to understand in that space? So I'm just blown away that the world works like this, and that we have these opportunities to dive into books that will give us a space to grow and learn about ourselves. So the books offer a bridge, a door, a window, whatever you want to call it, into a space for us to understand ourselves and the world around us, and to create the connections that are so important for us as we continue to grow and learn and navigate this place, this world, and what's happening here. And it allows for the magic, the excitement, because every time I was reading these things and connecting them to the other book I had, I was just like, what is happening? And it just makes you realize that books are so connected to not only ourselves and how we interact with them, but how they communicate with each other, as well as how they help us understand and navigate the world. So I know this is a little different than our typical Lit Illuminated, but thank you for joining me today. I hope that you can find magic in books too, and that your stories can somehow be connected as well, or that you have those moments of seeing the synchronicities of a book that was handed to you, one you randomly picked by seeing a title on the spine, and realizing that it is something that has a message for you and a way for you to understand yourself and the world around you. I hope you have a wonderful day.